Welcome to Jacklyn, please. Do we have the hand mic working, by the way, Andy? Yes, I know it's here. Yeah, it's here. That was hard.
Thanks. Hi. So I left 6 months ago to go to South Idaho to go to a Youth with a Mission Bible school, and I just graduated and have the opportunity to come and visit my home church. So, and I asked John Padula if it would be okay if I could share my story, because it's been a wild 2 years, and if you had told me 2 years ago that I would be 2 years clean and sober, I would have been like, that's nice, all my therapists told me otherwise. Anyway, so just to get us amped, I actually would like us all to stand up. And some of you are already going to know this, but we're going to do what's called the victory chant. I heard an oh no over there. Anyway, because really the reason I'm here is because I want to give glory back to Jesus. So we're going to start by giving glory back to Jesus. Okay, so please repeat after me. Hail Jesus, you're my King.
Hail Jesus, you're my King.
Your life frees me to sing.
Your life frees me to sing.
And I will praise you all my days.
I will praise you all my days.
Perfect in all your ways.
Perfect in all your ways.
Hail Jesus, you're my Lord.
Hail Jesus, you're my Lord.
I will obey your word.
I will obey your word.
I want to see your kingdom come.
I want to see your kingdom come.
Not my will, but yours be done.
Not my will, but yours be done.
Sing glory, glory to the Lamb.
Glory, glory to the Lamb.
You will take us into the land.
You will take us into the land.
We will conquer in your name.
We will conquer in your name.
And proclaim that Jesus reigns.
And proclaim that Jesus reigns.
Sing hail, hail, Light of Judah.
Hail, Light of Judah.
How wonderful you are.
How wonderful you are.
Hail, hail, Light of Judah.
Hail, hail, Light of Judah.
How powerful you are.
How powerful you are.
How powerful you are.
How powerful you are.
Woo! Thank you for doing that. That was mostly for me. Okay, so I went through the Good Samaritan rehab program in April 2017. Thank you, whoever that was. And my memory's still coming back. And I decided to get clean and sober off of, well, everything, really. Heroin, cocaine, cutting, stealing. On my birthday, April 9th, 2017. And they didn't actually have a spot for me, but one came available, which is actually a miracle in itself. And so I went into the rehab on Easter weekend, and my dad said, because I went in on Good Friday, he was like, you're going to die on Good Friday and come back to life on Easter. And it was so cool, because that's exactly what happened. Well, not in that couple days. It took months. But, and I actually wasn't planning on doing the outpatient program originally. I was set to go home. I had a time limit to get my renter's assistance back, and I was like, I'm going back to Spokane. You can't stop me. And then God was like, do outpatient. And I was like, are you for real right now? Like, I don't even have to do this. And I complained to Stephen Hemming. I called him when I was at the outpatient. I was like, I don't even have to be here. And he was like, well, then leave. Like, why are you here then? And I was like, well, because God told me. And he was like, oh, well, then you better humble yourself and do this. And I was like, oh, shoot. So that's like the mini testimony. What I really want to talk about today, and I was praying about this for a couple weeks now, and I was getting nothing until right before I came here. And there's two things that I really are on my heart to talk about. Expectancy and expectation, and intimacy and intensity. And that'll make more sense. So I'm going to start with expectation and expectancy. And this is part of my testimony. So in the Bible school, we went from Genesis to Revelation. And like I've grown up, in church my whole life, and I thought, yeah, I know this. I didn't know anything. Okay? Like once you learn how to actually read the Bible with cultural and historical background, it's like, oh my gosh, this like actually makes sense now. Like there's verses in there like, don't boil a goat in its mother's milk, and I'm thinking, okay, I wasn't going to do that anyway. But now it makes sense. But the biggest thing that I got out of the first 5 books of the Bible, which, I never really cared about. I'm like, oh my gosh, rules. Can we go back to Proverbs? But it just opened up to me. Like how I literally feel is like I stepped out of the dusty closet into Narnia is how I felt when I went through this Bible school. Like I was like, oh my goodness, like there's endless possibilities now. And I heard somebody share about the story of the Israelites and how God gave them a promise for years that he was going to deliver them out of the hands of the Egyptians because they were being persecuted. And so they created an expectancy in their mind, or expectation. I think it's expectation. I can't remember the definitions. Anyway, of how it was going to go. They're like, oh, God's going to deliver us. So every time that Pharaoh said no again, they were like, God, you remember that thing you said? Like, what's going on here? And they lost faith in his promise, such that by the time of the end of the 10 plagues, they were just like, whatever. And he takes them out and he splits the Red Sea and they cross over, and as they're being chased by the Egyptians, they're like, oh my gosh, he brought us out here to die. What the heck? Like, we should have just stayed there, And then even after God drowns the Egyptians, they cross over, and then they're hungry, and there's no water, and they're like, told you, brought us out here to die. Should have left us there where there's water and food at least, even though we were being treated bad. And so God gives them manna and quail from the sky of all things, and they're, and it's still not good enough. And then they go into the promised land and to scout it out, and they find giants. But they also find fruit and honey and all this stuff. But what they complain about, they come back and they're like, there's giants, they're gonna kill us. And God's just like, I can't catch a break with you guys. And so this relates to my story, because I have had a promise of deliverance in my life prophesied to me for like the past 15 years. And I've had so many people come to me and say, you're going into a season of deliverance and restoration, like the verse, he will restore the years the locusts had eaten. James. Somewhere in the Bible, my brain, Joel, there we go. I went to Bible school. Anyway, so Joel 2 was like my chapter, and I read it again and again and again, and I knew that God was speaking to me saying, everything that has been taken from you, I'm going to replace. But then, things kept happening that didn't look like that didn't match up to that, to my expectation of that prophecy and that promise. And so the biggest part of my testimony starts when I was 28. After years of already self-harm and alcohol, trying to deal with the pain of being sexually and physically abused, when I was 28, there was a month when everything possible could have gone wrong. And my apartment burned down. I found out I was pregnant, miscarried a week later, had an ovarian surgery, found out my ex was using heroin the whole time. And I just was like, whoa, this is not a human amount of things to handle right now. And I went to the darkness. And I even had a person prophesy to me, "You're headed towards the darkness," and God says, "Go back to the light." And I was just like, that's a cute warning. And went straight into the darkness. And it was like, I look and now I see he was planting these people in my path that were like, don't go there, don't go there. And I was just like, why isn't God talking to me? I feel so, anyway. And so now I look back and I see how I was just like the Israelites because God was always there. And like, now I look back, my miscarriage saved my life. And that sounds so screwed up. But I was with a drug dealer who is still in that life. And if I had had that child, I would be in his life for the rest of my life because I'm not the kind of person that keeps children from fathers. And yeah, like I never have to talk to him again, yay, you know? And it was a horrible experience. But I look back and I'm like, oh my gosh, like that saved my life in a weird, ironic, weird way. And same with the fire, like I had become so wrapped up in things. I was so deep in my theft that I had 2 therapists give up on me. And they even screened me to see if I had antisocial personality disorder, which really hurt my feelings. Because if you know anything about that disorder, it means you basically don't care about people. But she didn't know what to do with me. She was like, nothing stops you. Like, you'll get caught and almost arrested, and somehow you get out of it. Like, why is this happening? Like, you're never, if you don't ever feel bad or guilty, you're not going to change. And I would be clean for a week from stealing and then go right back. I was stealing like tongue depressors from the doctor's office. Like I couldn't stop myself. And I know, I'm like, what am I going to do with this? Say ah. So it had gotten so bad to the point where people were convinced that I just didn't care about the consequences. And I almost went to prison a couple times and then somehow miraculously didn't. To the point where people were like, you deserve to go to prison at this point. And so I showed a stupid amount of grace. And I would say that theft was my heroin. I mean, I also did heroin, but that's how I know that theft was like my heroin. It was so unstoppable. I couldn't, and I would just come home and lay all the stuff on the floor and just cry and be like, I don't even want this. I don't even know why I'm taking this. And the whole time that I was in addiction, God was still there with me. And like a big part of my story was when I watched War Room for the first time. And in that movie, she makes this prayer closet and goes in there and just spends time with God. And 2 weeks before I used heroin for the first time, not knowing that I was going to use heroin for the first time, God told me to make a prayer closet. So I cleared out room and my walk-in closet deal and just started posting prayers, posting verses, pictures, magazine cutouts, whatever. And then I used for the first time. And, so when, as you all know, hell breaks loose. And there was nights when I couldn't sleep. But I would go in there in the closet and I could sleep. And there were nights when I used in there. I mean, I'm going to say this right now. The Holy Spirit's in places y'all don't even know about. And I've had people tell me that I wasn't saved when I was using. I'm like, maybe, but God was with me. And I know that. And because I would go in that closet and I had a peace. And I walk out of that closet back to the chaos. And so that was another way that he was with me. In those moments, I look at when my fire happened and I lost about half my possessions. They wouldn't let me back into my apartment for over a month. And by that time, there was so much damage from the water and the smoke that most of it wasn't even salvageable. Furniture, clothes, books. But miraculously, all the things that matter were not damaged. Like my artwork and all my photographs and all my scrapbooks and all my poetry. Tell me that's not on purpose, And I look and see the way that God came through. I recently was given the chance to speak at our YWAM base gathering, and the Lord told me to speak on gratitude. And it was way more for me than for anybody else. And I started to go back and see all the ways that he blessed me after my fire. In my mind, all I could see is I just lost a child at 6 weeks, and I didn't even know I was pregnant, and my ex was telling me to get an abortion. I was in the room throwing up, probably miscarrying, and he wouldn't even help me. And my fire killed 2 of my neighbors, and I lost half my possessions. And they were taking my picture as I had a panic attack in the parking lot, and they posted it on the public news all over the internet. So all I could see was loss. But after my fire, like, people came out of the woodwork for me that I didn't even know I knew them. Just bringing me bags of clothes. One friend from Alcoholics Anonymous gave me a brand new KitchenAid mixer that hadn't even been out of the box. She was like, well, you might not get yours back. Just take it. I don't care. You know, Red Cross gifted me gift cards and brand new towels, brand new dishes. Friends gave me furniture. Strangers let me stay in their house, gave me food. Like, it was unreal. And when I walked into my new apartment 2 weeks after I lost my home, I was like, this home is God's grace. This isn't founded on things I stole. This isn't founded on manipulation or anything that I tried to make happen. This is founded on God's grace. And I was like, at the time, I said, I am going to remember that. But then I didn't. And I did go back to stealing. I went back to marijuana. I went back to cigarettes. I went back to alcohol. I went back to cocaine. I went back to heroin. I went back to sex. I went back to partying, everything. Just within a couple months of that promised vow that I made. And yet he provided this random next door neighbor that was a prophetess woman person, and she was the one that warned me, like, I feel like God wants you to know that you're headed to the darkness and you need to go back to the light. And I was like, woman, I don't even know you and you don't know my life. But she did. Well, Jesus did through her. And I didn't listen. And yet I look now and I see all the people he planted. There was a place called Christ Kitchen just up the road from my house that had a Bible study on Thursday mornings. And I started going there, and all the women there started to pray for me. I said, one time I lifted up a prayer request and said, I would like to pray for deliverance, and that's all I said. No details, I just said I need deliverance. And actually a couple of them are here tonight, and they started to pray for deliverance in my life without me even knowing it. And I had a friend from college who couldn't make it tonight, who would take me out to lunch. He's like, call me up, I'll take you to lunch whenever. I'll pay for it, just so that I would have someone to talk to. There's a family here that I met through Spokane Civic Theater, befriended me. Oh, there they are. And the one thing that I love about them is that they never once rebuked me for the lifestyle I had. They were just like, we'll meet with you, we'll take you to coffee, we'll come see you at your house, we can come to church with us. Like, they just wanted relationship, and they never once were like, you're pretty messed up, like, maybe we should pray about this. Like, they just loved me. And that was God. Like, today I had this privilege to go back to my last apartment complex where I lived before rehab. And I had gone to the manager and said, I want to know if you'd be willing to break my lease early so I can go to rehab. And he said, without a doubt. And I got to go back today and hug him and say, thank you, because God used you to set me free. And he almost started crying. So expectation. My expectation was that it was going to happen a certain way. You know, I had home after home, car after car, boyfriend after boyfriend, job after job, gone. And all I could see is, why do you keep taking things from me? Why would you do this? Everybody keeps saying, oh, you're the blesser, you're the giver. Well, why would you hold out on me like this? Why would you hold out on me like this? All the people that I care about, relapsing, dying, leaving me. You know, all the opportunities I have, a joke. For a minute, I feel like I'm going to be something, and then it's dashed in my face. Why? But the whole time, he's putting all these people, you know, someone you run into on the bus who just says, hey, God bless you. And I'm like, uh-huh. But now I look back and I'm like, oh my goodness. Like, hello? You know, that was him again. And so I guess my heart in the expectancy thing is, I look at and I read the story about the Israelites, and I see the pain they had. You know, they've been in slavery with their children, with their parents, with their friends, you know, working side by side, getting whipped all day. And God said, I'm going to set you free. And they thought it was going to be like, boom, Pharaoh, set my people free. And he would have been like, yeah, sure. But God wanted it to be bigger than that, to the point where they would know that it was him. But even when he made it bigger than that, they still didn't know it was him, you know? So for me, I look back and I see that my expectation was that I thought it was all going to come together in a certain way. And I didn't trust him because I have trust issues. And you know, and I'm still learning through that. And I've been in a season in my life that I call the desert now. I was calling it the wilderness, but I think it's a desert now. One of the people I mentor with actually asked me to pray about, like, ask God where you are. Where you are. Is it a desert? Is it a wilderness? Is it the valley? Is it a mountain? What is it? And then ask him to show you where the beauty is and to show you where the purpose is. And so I asked him to do that, and I was like, okay, I'm definitely in a desert because all I see is sand. Because when I got out of rehab, I continued to set before me where I thought I was going to go, you know? I started to work again, and I never thought I'd work again, and I thought, oh, this is great. But then that didn't go how I thought it was going to go. It was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. And because it's hard when you thought you were going to be on Social Security and all of a sudden you're a full-time PIC manager. It's like, whoa, not prepared for this. And I kept thinking, you know, okay, my goal in life is to get a home again, get my stuff back, and get my life back. I'm going to be independent and secure, and that's going to be proof to me that I've arrived. Well, I can tell you right now that I am 31 years old, living in my parents' basement, never been married, never have kids, don't have a career, not in ministry. And for the longest time, I kept hitting that wall of like, how come they're in ministry? How come they have a career? How come they get kids? How come they get to be married? And just feeling like something is wrong with me. I'm not doing enough. I'm not working hard enough. You know, my brain's not working right, you know. But I was just telling someone today, I was like, you know, I don't have a home, you know, and I don't have all these things that I thought that I needed, but I'm free. And I used to have all that. I had an apartment, well, kind of. I mean, it was paid for by Spokane Housing, but I had an apartment, and, you know, I'm independent. And I had a job, had a car, I had a boyfriend, but I wasn't free. I mean, I thought I was free. You know, somehow I managed to always have money, and my mom's like, I thought you weren't working. How did you get this money? Oh, you know, I've just got friends that give me money. What do you say to that, you know? And it was never enough, and it wasn't real. And I knew it wasn't real, or I wouldn't have been so tormented. So I guess the conclusion of that is just, now when I look back, and actually my therapist told me therapists are great, I love therapy, told me to make a victory journal. Well, that's what I'm calling it. She said to make a gratitude journal, and I'm not good at the whole, find 10 things to be grateful for each day. I like grass. Like, I can't do it. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to call it a victory journal, and instead of writing down all these cliche things that I'm grateful for, I'm going to write down 2 things every day that I overcame. And so an example is, sometimes it's as simple as, I gave myself permission to not be perfect today. And I am a recovering perfectionist. So, and that's been part of my challenge. Like Danny Cleve did his sermon on legalism versus righteousness on Sunday, and I was like, oh my gosh, God knew I was going to be here today. Because legalism and perfectionism go hand in hand. And part of my journey when I went to this Bible school was breaking free from perfectionism. For the first 2 months, I did everything. I was like, I'm going to be the best student ever. And to the point where the staff were like, you don't have to do that much work. You should probably not do that much work. And then the second 2 months, I stopped doing the work because I felt like God literally was like, stop doing your homework, which of course some people would be like, God wouldn't say that. He said it to me. And so I did, and it was so hard. I would wake up every day like, oh my gosh, I should be doing my reading. I should be, and he was like, no, you should nothing right now. Can you just be with me? And I was like, no, I don't think I can do that. I need to be doing something. Because of the shame of my past and like how lazy I was and all the Netflix I watched and all the people I hurt. And real quick, when I did Youth with a Mission for the first time, my discipleship training school in the fall, you have to raise support for that. And asking for money from people is like a no-no when you're an addict, right? It's like, oh, I shouldn't do that again. And so it was so hard for me. Like, I cried about it, and my leaders were like, you have to do this. And I'm like, I can't do that. I can't. Like, I used to borrow money from people, and then go spend $200 on heroin, and be like, oh, yeah, I had to pay some bills. And so I had a stronghold of shame and a stronghold of fear of man that I'm still definitely working on. And so this kind of leads me into my second piece, which is intimacy and intensity. This is going to be like the vulnerable half. So I was sexually abused when I was 2, but I didn't find out till I was 18. I mean, I was suspicious. And when I found out, I just kind of like everything, like all my morality was just like, oh, there it goes, I was like, why am I not drinking right now, So, like, I started drinking in my dorm room when I was 20, and I thought I was a huge rebel. I had, like, liquor in my dorm room, and which was against the rules because it's a Christian college anyway. But I just, like, went full force, everything. I was like, oh, we're smoking weed? Let's do it. I don't know even what you're smoking, but let's do it. I don't even know who you are, but we're hanging out right now. How am I getting home? I don't know, and just stopped caring about myself. And the biggest lie I've ever believed is that I'm not worth fighting for, so why should I? And the lie that God's been really pressing into me is the lie of what I thought intimacy was. To me, intimacy, for the past 30 years, whatever, meant I'm going to make myself vulnerable, and you're going to rip me apart, and then we're going to do it again, and again, and again, and call it love. And that's part of what the purpose of this Bible school was. The part of the Bible school that really broke me was we went to the intertestamental time, and Malachi's the last book of the Old Testament. And in Malachi, the Israelites are like, where were you, bro, when this happened? When this happened? When we lost this? When all these people died? When we were hungry? And they were just listing it. Malachi 1:2, God answers, I have always loved you. And that broke me for like 2 months. Like, I was just like, what? And it wasn't even one of the staff that was doing that teaching. We had to do our own teachings on a minor prophet, and it was actually one of the students who was doing the teaching. But she just like brought the heart out of it, the heart of God. So through our Old Testament time, we had to pick a study topic. This is applicable. A topic of study. And I was going to do intimacy. And I felt like God said, no, you need to do Father Heart of God, because if you understand the Father Heart of God, you will get intimacy. And I was just like, I don't want to do that. That's dangerous. I don't want to do that. So I did it. And I had like 17 pages of notes by the end. And unreal what I found. And what I found is that he's always loved me. And so we spent a week, cross-cultural training week, in Oregon with this woman who does prayer, inner healing prayer ministry. So I got to know her, and she's been praying with me ever since. And she had this book in her house. It's this Christian book on trauma and how to heal from trauma through prayer. Because even though therapists are great, sometimes it's not enough. And there was this sentence in there of like how to recognize that you're in a toxic relationship, which I'm like, I already know, when I'm in one. I don't. There was a sentence in there that said, when you mistake intimacy with intensity. And I was just like, pew. And so I've been meditating on that, and I really want to touch on that. That's kind of what God's laid on my heart. Because I wanted intimacy. We're made with this craving to be known. And in the Bible school, we learned about this word yada, in Hebrew word, which means to know by experiencing. So when it says, and then he knew his wife, it was he knew her by experiencing her. And so when God says, I will love you and you will be loved by me, and you will know me and I will be your God. I will know you and you will know me by experiencing. And that also wrecked me. Doesn't take much. And so I look at my life and I see my patterns. And I was a serial dater for 10 years. Yeah, 10 years. It's called incapable of being single. And I wanted to know why I was incapable of being single and why everybody kept telling me that I should be single. I'm like, why would you say that? That's so boring. I've been reading this book called Let Me Be a Woman by someone. Elizabeth Elliot, there we go. And she's actually the wife of Jim Elliot, who died being a missionary to the Aka Indians years ago. Cool story. Anyway, in the book, she talks about how marriage and singleness are gifts from God, but we don't get to decide which season that we're in. He gets to decide what we need at that time, and it's his gift to us. And I was like, yuck, like this is not a gift. And like everyone around me is having babies and getting engaged, and me and my brother are like, why are we in our 30s and we're watching everyone younger than us? Anyway, so I've been doing this evaluation of my life. I've been looking back and like, what did I misconstrue about this word, intimacy? And it started at a young age. For me, intimacy theoretically meant I'm safe. But what I really think it meant was I have to earn my worth. And once I've earned my worth, I'll be safe. And so now I look back and I see the pattern. And really what I feel like God laid on my heart to talk about is my part of my testimony that I think is the hardest to talk about isn't the heroin, honestly. I think the hardest part of my testimony to talk about is sex. Because I convinced myself that intensity was love, and that intensity, passion, and in the moment, I can't be without you or I'm going to die, was healthy, and that's love. And to the point where, even up to last year, people were trying to talk to me rationally and be like, Jacklyn, and I'm just like, and so now when I'm reading about intimacy and I'm reading about Father Heart of God and I'm reading about all these attributes about him, what stands out to me the most is the word advocate. And God has spoken the word advocate over my life since the beginning of my discipleship training school in September. And he was like, this is the word that I need you to hold on to. I would draw it in my journal in big letters all the time and just, what does this mean? What are you trying to say to me? What are you trying to say to me? And it hit me when I read Malachi 1:2. I have always loved you. And that's what advocacy is. Advocacy is reckless, stupid, foolish love. Like, when God was up on the mountain with Moses, and the Israelites were down below, he had just given them the first set of the 10 Commandments. He had just committed to them and saying, you will be my people. This will be your nation. You are going to be, the chosen people. I'm setting you apart from all of these nations that are doing all these horrible things. I'm holding you to a high standard. You are going to be pure, and we are going to have intimacy. And he goes up on the mountain with Moses, or Moses goes up on the mountain with God, and they make the golden calf. Instantly. Like, they're like, oh, intimacy with God. Hey, it'd be great right now? Let's take all our gold jewelry and make an idol. And the teacher who taught on this told us the equivalency to this moment was a wedding ceremony. And the man says to his bride, I give you all of me. And then the bride has sex with someone else on the altar that they just made vows on. And then the husband comes back and is like, for real? So when God comes back down the mountain and he sees what they've done, he's like, I just gave you everything. Why would you do this? I have always loved you. And I used to read the Old Testament and go, okay, I can see a bipolar God. I can see it. Now when I read the Old Testament, I see a God who is emotional, a God who is sensitive, a God who is vulnerable, a God who is strong, but a God who feels. And so I wrap my mind around that, and I look back at my life and what I thought intimacy was, and how I repeatedly was so afraid of being rejected, of not being worthy, of not being fought for, of not being enough, that I'd be like, oh, well, I'll give you everything right now, then will you stay? And I made some very selfish choices and hurt a lot of people because I wanted intimacy. And I thought I had to make intimacy happen, or that I wouldn't have it. But God makes intimacy happen, not me. And now, at this point in my life, it is still hard. And that's part of what I want people to get. It's like, oh my gosh, it is not going to get easy. I mean, that's why people don't do this. They don't get sober, because it's not easy, but you'll be free. And I still have days where I think, I can't handle my emotions right now. And I think about cutting and stuff. And a lot of people get all freaked out, and they're like, oh, send her back to the ranch. Oh my gosh, But it's part of the journey. Your mind might still go there because it's been going there for 30 years, And Corinthians says, you can take every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. But it doesn't happen overnight. Like, oh, done with that thought, never going to see you again. Like, no, it'll be there 10 minutes later. And I wasn't prepared for that. And so there's been several times where I thought, I should just throw in the towel. Everybody else is. I don't want to be the last one standing. That's lame. But it's true, And so I feel like this season of the desert, for me, was so hard because God was like, I need you all to myself. I'm taking you away from your support system. I'm taking you away from the people you love, from your dreams, from your ambitions, and I am placing you here in the middle of the sand, and you're going to know me by experiencing me. And I'm going to know you by experiencing you. And I'm just like, oh, this sounds like intimacy again. We know how that went before. And God's like, no, that wasn't intimacy. That was intensity. Not that God's not intense, he's intense. But that wasn't it. That wasn't it. And so I started looking around this desert to see what I could find there. And I want to tell you what I found when I started looking. You know, some of the most beautiful flowers bloom in the desert. And so I looked around the desert and I saw my brother who struggles with depression, and God brought godly friends into his life when he didn't have any friends and he thought God made him wrong. And I looked around and I saw how I haven't been legally allowed to have a bank account for the past 10 years, and I was never supposed to be allowed to have one again. And I just got a call a month ago that I'm eligible for a checking account. I looked around, sand, and I saw my mom and my dad, who should have disowned me a long time ago, who I abused their trust time and time again, and yet they were starting to trust me again, financially again. And those are just a few examples. And so what I'm learning right now is that intimacy isn't always what we think it is. And our expectations will pull us away from the truth, and we'll miss it. And I know I have stood up here 100 times, and I've heard people give speeches on, like, you know, oh, sex before marriage is wrong, and you should be grateful every day for what you have, and blah, 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 blah. And I've heard it all 1,000 times and didn't care. And this is the first time in my life when I'm, like, starting to, you know, hopefully get it. And so I guess my heart to share with you is just that, like, you don't have to change yourself for him to know you. And so what I want to leave you with is the story of the adulterous woman. And we actually got to do a skit of the adulterous woman story for our graduation. When he comes to her, someone pointed this out to me. It was like, he didn't say it was okay what she was doing, but he also didn't rebuke her. He said, he who is without sin, you cast the first stone against her. Basically, this isn't how we do things, people. This isn't intimacy. This isn't love. He advocated for her. That was how he won her heart. It wasn't by going to her and saying, girl, you need to clean up, you're a hoe. How he won her heart was he stood up for her to the supposed Christians and said, that's my daughter. Don't you say anything bad about her. She's pure. Because I said so. That's intimacy. And so I just want you all to meditate on what intimacy is. I'm still trying to get it. And so I just want to say a quick prayer, and then I'll let you go. God, I just want to thank you so much for everything that you've done so far. And I know that there's still days where we don't get it, and we wonder if we ever will get it. And why not just go back everybody else is? But you made a promise, and you said, I will deliver you. I will. I will. You say, I will. And you will know me. And I will know you. So God, I just thank you so much that your true heart is for intimacy. And that you have always loved me. And that's what makes me enough. Sorry. I can't do enough right things. But you said, will you just sit with me in the sand and I'll help you find the flowers? Will you just take a walk with me? You don't have to change. I know you're broken. Just let me sit here in the brokenness. So God, I just ask that you would just sit with us tonight in the brokenness and help us to have hope that you mean what you say and you are good. Even if it looks like Pharaoh's saying no again, we know that you will set us free. You will. Thank you. In Jesus' name, amen.